Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Oklahoma Sooners football feedback. Oklahoma wins this season opener 45-13 over UTEP. A far cry from where Oklahoma was a year ago at this time. I think if everyone remembers, Oklahoma won the opener against Tulane 40-35, and then obviously we know where the season went from there. But this year, Oklahoma wins the opener 45-13. Typically for me, I don't take just kind of my 2 cents on season openers. I typically don't take too much. Obviously you look at the good and the bad, and you balance those. I don't overreact too much to a loss and too much to a win in the first game of the year. Typically, one of the things that you hear more often than not in football, more than any other sport, is teams improve more from the first to second game than they do any other game of the season. But yeah, I mean, I think everything was positive. Oklahoma gave up some yards, certainly. A little bit there in the second quarter, kind of didn't necessarily go off the rails, but gave up some passes. Didn't missed a few tackles, but then got everything together a little bit, and then much better in the second half tackling. But overall, much better tackling than we've seen in years past. I think when you look at offensively, Dylan Gabriel looked good. I think there's a little bit of rust and just kind of getting the timing down on some of those RPO plays that they have going on, and they'll certainly get there. Running game looked solid. Eric Gray looked a lot better between the tackles to me than he had been certainly last year, and it was evident that he's bulked up and he's where he needs to be from a physicality perspective. Offensive line definitely played better, I think, than what we've seen at least early on in the first part of the season here. I think there's timing things that like I said, that you want to work through from an offensive perspective. But I think other than that, you played pretty clean. There's a couple of procedure calls early on. But then, obviously you had that one play that took off the touchdown here late in the game with Javonte Barnes. But love what you see on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, as they mentioned on the broadcast, very, very vanilla. I think both sides were very vanilla. And then, so you look at it, you don't bring any exotic blitz packages. You don't necessarily do anything outside of the norm. A few looks, but not anything. A few different looks, I should say, but then not anything crazy that you would typically see, in a regular game come season time. I would expect it to be very similar next week against Kent State. But all in all, very solid opener for Brent Venables in this team. 32-point win. You cover the spread, and like I said, a team that's very comparable to what Oklahoma saw last year against Tulane, right? When you saw a 40-35, narrow victory, gave up almost 400 yards total offense last year, and then I think this year you look at giving up 316, right? And I think running the ball, Oklahoma was much better against the run than they were last year, at least early on. So it remains to be seen. There's some things defensively. There's some depth concerns up front. There's some areas within the secondary and so you wait to see if it was more of a product of being a little bit more vanilla, or if there's some work to do from a coverage perspective. I think Willie Washington was really, really solid. Didn't really throw much to his side of the field, which is what you would expect with the experience that he has. I think it'll be interesting, this competition that continues to flow on the other cornerback side. Jaden Davis didn't do anything terrible. Missed an open field tackle early in the game, but then you could see once they brought some depth in. Kendall Dennis did not play particularly well in coverage. So it'll be interesting to see how that cornerback spot goes. Is it one of those things where you try to get maybe you look at getting your best two cover guys on the field more often than not when you have DJ Graham and Willie Washington in the game? But there's some things obviously that the coaches saw that they felt Jaden Davis, and like I said, he didn't do anything to hurt the team. I thought Billy Bowman was much more active, much more physical, much more confident than he was last year. Early on, all around the ball, almost snagged a one-handed interception. Defensive line wise, you saw a lot of disruption in the middle from Jeffrey Johnson, from Jalen Redmond, and then Reggie Grimes, 2.5 sacks, I believe he had for the game, was really good. And they talked to people that watched the broadcast, um, and you saw a lot of what they were very very assignment sound, very physical, tackled well, and a lot of awareness on what the defense or what the offense, I'm sorry, was trying to do. So like I said, all in all, very solid. And then you've got one more. You've got Kent State, which you'll get to watch a little bit of a preview when they face Washington later on this evening. I believe that's a 9:30 kick, so late Pac-12 after dark game there. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts. So we'll go to your questions and comments, and then just see what you guys have, and let's continue to talk Oklahoma Sooners football. John, hey Jason, do you think they need more pressure on the quarterback, the rush than Oaks? But yeah, and I think as I mentioned a little bit, I think that was a little bit of a product of being very vanilla on the defensive side of the ball. That they stunned it a little bit. They brought some blitzers from the linebacker spot, but they really stayed in their base defense for the majority of the game. There's no chance. I know I saw a lot of people on Twitter just kind of worried about, hey, we're not getting a lot of pressure. I think that was the game plan. They're not going to show as much, with this defense than they will. I would guess probably Nebraska is when they start showing kind of the full arsenal on both sides of the ball, but not really anything that I'm considerably worried about. I think the mentality that Venables will have is much different. Than what you've seen in the past with Alex Grinch. I think you will see him. If it gets to a point where you don't think that the secondary is not able to cover, then you'll see a lot more pressure, a lot more blitzing. Those of you that remember Venables from here before, he's not going to let the quarterback just sit back and throw the ball. So, not really worried or concerned about the pass rush at this juncture. Ryan, thanks for the comment here. Had some issues at left tackle. They started to get bullied briefly. I think we missed Wanye a little bit. I think definitely when Tyler Guyton went out of the game, for I think it was a series or a few plays, they missed some blocks there. I think Aaron Parks came in. The depth isn't where you would like it to be without Wanye. I'll give you that, Ryan. I thought Tyler Guyton played well. I thought that was solid. And he's just his first, career start. He played fullback and offensive line a little bit last year at TCU. So, there's some growing pains that you would expect on that left side. But yeah, I think from everything I've heard that Wanye will be out for 2 games, and so he'll be back for Nebraska. Would still assume that Tyler Guyton starts, but at least you'll have Wanye to provide a little bit of depth there as well. Carvin Dylan Gabriel thought it was a great football, good game. Remember these extended preseason games, just as long as there's weekly improvement. Yeah, and that, as I mentioned in the top, is most teams will improve more from game 1 to game 2 than they will any game in the season or any stretch in the season. So yeah, you'll look for continued improvement out of this team, and I think the thing that you didn't see last year, at least on the defensive side of the ball, and even offensively to a certain degree, you didn't see a lot of really marketed improvement from game 1 to game 2. Now, Kent State was a decent team, a pretty decent team last year. They've lost a little bit, including their starting quarterback, Dustin Crum, I believe, was the quarterback for Kent State that's moved on. But again, you had a guy today in Gavin Hardison who has an extremely strong arm, probably one of the more lively arms that you'll see, that Oklahoma will see. But yeah, I think when you look at, when you look at, what Oklahoma is going into, then Nebraska, even though they're struggling a little bit today. Last I saw, they were up 31-17, but they're still struggling a little bit today with FCS. I think that will still be obviously your first big formidable test on both sides of the ball. They have only installed maybe half the defense, good tackling, good hits. Yeah. Now I think they probably installed a lot more, but they weren't going to show any of that, today, at least to a greater extent. Um, Yeah, so I'll reserve judgment, Jeremy, on that. I don't know that necessarily, there's not necessarily anything wrong. I think it was based on just the coverage that they had in place. I think if Venables was really unhappy, you would have seen him and Valai and some of the other guys really just kind of going nuts on the sidelines, and you really didn't see that. So to me, um, it looked like it looked like this was the plan all along: play a little bit soft coverage, come up and tackle in space, which is something that Oklahoma hasn't done well of, and done well the last few years, and it was much more improved this year, without a doubt. Julian, thanks for joining here. Oklahoma looks so much more physical than last year's squad. Doesn't even seem like yeah. I think the physicality was something that you assumed that you were going to see, and you absolutely saw that today, without a doubt. No doubt about it. Yeah, first game. There's always going to be some overreaction. Um, First game. Right? How do you feel like the O-line performed in pass pro? I think for the most part it was good. As you mentioned here, they were sacked a few times. I think there was one time where Gabriel probably could have gotten rid of the ball a little bit quicker. One was probably bad pass pro. I think overall it was fairly solid. I always listen to, because it's always great for me to listen to somebody that's an expert. I can't wait to listen to Gabe when he kind of breaks down the offensive line play here over the next couple of days. But yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is something that's going to continue to get better and better. But off the cuff, I'd probably give it like a B minus. I think, just from a offensive line performance perspective. Scheme of the defense, I agree, is a B. The offense would be plus. I think they will be better. Yeah, agree. It definitely will be much better. Yeah, absolutely. You got to take the positives really early on, because you don't have a big sample size yet. Um, you know, it was a much better start than it was last year. But yes, you see how you got to progress from game one to game two, and then see what happens from there. Yeah, I think this is interesting discussion sooner. I think I do think that he'll continue to get more and more carries as the season goes on. I think his fumble in his first carry didn't necessarily do him any favors, but um, I think with Riley in the past, like anytime something like that happened, it was like an immediate pull. He got pulled. He would get pulled from the game. And things like that. And so a little bit different mentality here. But yeah, I think he'll probably start getting a little bit more looks in that running back game. But both Eric Gray and Marcus Major were really good today. Particularly Marcus Major in between the tackles, getting those tough runs. When Oklahoma needed them to. So yeah, I think you like what you see out of the running backs here. I think wide receiver wise, Jalil Farouk wasn't quite as involved as I would have expected him to. Um, Sorry, guys, my computer's going nuts here. Um, Jalil Farouk wasn't quite as involved, only one catch for 9 yards. He had one drop, but he wasn't as involved. But you'll see that timing get down a little bit better as the season goes on. The passing game is much more of a timing and situation, and with this being the first year of the install of the levy system, you certainly expect that on both sides of the ball not to get cleaned up as the season moves forward. EFB, it was not a good game. I can think of only one team on the schedule who will let them play this poorly and win. That's the next team. Yeah, sorry, I completely disagree with that. I think the team played really well. You won the game by 32 points. You you only give up one touchdown, a couple of really long field goals. Don't really agree that this was not a good game. I thought this was a very solid opener for Oklahoma, and so I'm not sure what to what you would expect in game one, and so but I think it was solid from my perspective. Yes, definitely ran through contact better, looked more like the guy that you expected last year. I think coming from Tennessee, but yeah, I would agree with you. He definitely looked much better than he did last year, um, without a doubt. Braden Wills played great, and so did Eric and Marcus. Yeah, I think that's probably the silver lining on the defensive side of the ball was, what is the defense going to bring? What is the defense going to continue to bring in terms of the secondary and things like that? So, played a lot of guys. Trey Morrison struggled a little bit. I think your first your first team guys played pretty well all across the board, but I think when you come in, maybe the depth isn't as solid in certain places as you would like it to be. So that excuse me, that certainly plays into it, and I think that will play into the strategy kind of going forward, making sure that depth is where you need to be, and if it's not, you got guys that are playing maybe a little bit more than you typically would like, but I think you've got good depth around on the defensive line. And then in certain spots on linebacker position as well. But then maybe not quite as much at this point, at least at this point, on the in the secondary. But we'll see how that continues to play out for sure. Um, Play the game in the round. Yeah, that was very, very, very interesting. I didn't see him play a ton outside of that one, but that was obviously a very specific set of specific play for Gavin Freeman, and he did a really, really good job. Obviously, from a walk on, that was pretty cool to see. From my perspective. So, just some other things around the country. I don't know how much people have have seen this. That they were following that Appalachian State North Carolina game um, was absolutely crazy at 11 o'clock. I think it was a 63-61 finish, if I remember right. Um, and then you've got a couple again. Georgia looked just as dominant as they have been, 49-3. Just dominant performance over Oregon, who is obviously coming in with a new head coach and Dan Lanning as well. But you've got a lot of really good games right now. You've got Cincinnati and Arkansas. Arkansas with a 7-point lead with a little over 2 minutes to go. Here looks like they have the ball, trying to run out the rest of the clock. You've got a couple of potential overtime games. You've got Houston up 27-24 over UTSA. You've got, let's see here, let me get my computer to work. Tulsa and Wyoming tied at 34. Looks like about to go into overtime. Tulsa missed a kick to send that to end that game in regulation. Let's see what else we got here. I think we can kind of get back to some of your questions. I know everyone's watching this game, or at least interested just to see how they're playing. USC's up 21-7 over Rice with a little under 10 minutes to go in the first half. Looks like Rice is driving inside the red zone right now. So I think you'll obviously see a very typical Texas, a very typical USC our Lincoln Riley coach team here as well. So yeah, a lot of good things. Kansas State's up 7-0 early on over South Dakota. Just kind of looking Big 12 wise, but a few good games coming up tonight as well. So we'll get back to some of your comments here. Defense was somewhat generic, but did an excellent job. How long before Venables? It's very. I mean, I think that's a very interesting. It looked like Venables was almost calling the plays. I don't know necessarily if he was, and I think interesting kind of behind the scenes exactly, what's going on in terms of who's calling the plays, who's running the defense. It very much looked like Venables was running the defense, just in how active he was on the defensive side of the ball, and you could see how much he was talking into the headset and things like that, and how what he was dictating out to his players after timeouts and breaks in action. So, you think that Venables has a very very strong influence, obviously on what's going on here from a defensive perspective. But yeah, it would be interesting to know exactly what that looks like in terms of who's calling the plays. But I think Venables obviously has a very big stamp on what that looks like. Um, Ryan, I was too a little bit, specifically Jaden Gibson. I thought he might get some run. Obviously, he got some run there towards the end of the game, when it was over. But I thought he might get um, a little bit more play. Maybe even Nick Anderson. I don't know if he got in the game late. I would assume that he did, as well. But yeah, that was a little bit surprising to me as well. I thought he would get a little bit more of an opportunity to play, and just get in there. So definitely agree with that comment. Um, let's see here. Roof upstairs based on the sideline, but agree. Yeah, very involved. Like I said, who knows how much. I mean, we as fans, and not in the day to day, will probably never know. But was very interesting um, to see exactly how that looked. Looks like USC is up 28-7 now. There was a interception return for a touchdown for the USC defense, something we never saw much of, unfortunately. Specifically returning a touchdown. Um, so let's see what else is going on. Top 25 related. Like I said, you've got Arkansas. That's kind of looks like they're milking the clock here. The last couple of minutes. This wasn't up in that. Watching this a little bit while the Oklahoma game was going on. This was really up and down. Back and forth. Arkansas took an early 7-0 lead. They were up 14-0, and then the scoring kind of got going a little bit, where it was now it's 31-24, obviously here. So um, yeah, there's a little bit of a break in some of the action, but you've got Utah and Florida that's just um, kicking off here on ESPN. Um, here it's actually playing on ESPN News there. So yeah, like I said, if you guys continue to have any questions, let's talk through those. We'll have a little bit more of an idea of what the competition looks like next week with Kent State tonight, against Washington. And if you want, like I said, if you guys want to watch that one, I'm looking here. I think that is a 9:30 local 9:30 local kick. Yes, it is 9:30. As they host Washington. I mean, as Washington hosts Kent State, Washington is about a 24-point pick, favorite in that game. So, then you look to the rest of the lineup here tonight. You've got Notre Dame and Ohio State. That'll be interesting. That'll be an interesting game. If anyone has Longhorn Network, you want to check out Texas. They host Louisiana Monroe before hosting Alabama next week at 7 p.m. And then you've got your normal slate of games here this evening. So yeah, good stuff. It seemed like offense a little slower third quarter, because our defense a little winded because offense so fast. Yeah, I mean, I think that's I wondered that the same. I'm not sure. Not sure. I think that maybe there's a little bit to that, and I think that's something that's going to have to be a little bit. And Levy even talked about that. That's going to have to be a little bit of an ebb and flow. I think for Oklahoma this year in terms of understanding and talking and and hey, when you've got a that's the when you've got to worry about how many plays the defense is on the field for if you're scoring so fast. Like I think Oklahoma scored so fast there in the first quarter. They had like 3 minutes of time of possession. So when they talked about this on the broadcast, and I didn't completely agree talking about that being a almost like a meaningless stat anymore. I don't necessarily agree from that perspective. Yeah, it doesn't mean the same amount probably that it used to, just in terms of just in terms of what if whoever wins the time of possession really kind of wins that game. That's a very old school way of thinking. But what you will say is that if you have a defense that's struggling or winded and a little bit, you look and you kind of try to identify, okay, maybe we can start going a little bit more methodically, um, and not pushing the gas pedal too high or too hard. So that'll be something that that's constant conversations with as well. But um, last time Venables, so Carvin, last time Venables coached in Oklahoma, there was a lot of turnovers and many touchdowns off turnovers. Yeah, I mean, I expect this team will force a lot of turnovers, if nothing else, from a physicality perspective. They got that late interception, um, as well. So yeah, this team they'll definitely force some turnovers. I don't have any doubt about that whatsoever. Looks like we got a 3rd and 8 from Arkansas here. Let's see. Looks like Cincinnati stopped it, um, but they're out of timeouts here. It looks like so 33 seconds. So, barring a miracle, Arkansas will get this win over over Cincinnati to start the year. Um, what do you think about the 10-12 team playoff? It makes the champ games way more important. Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot to kind of digest on this 12 team playoff. First of all, I would lean more towards it happening closer to 2024 than the official date when the existing contract ends, which would be 2026. I think they want to get this in, really as quickly as possible. Obviously, more from a financial perspective. There's things I like about it. There's things I don't. I don't love automatic qualifiers for winning, for winning conference championships, but I know that those will be part of a ranking system. So, um, because when you look at last year, like look at Georgia for example, they did not win. They did not win a conference championship. However, you know, a team like Utah, you may have gotten an automatic bye because they were a conference champion, and Georgia wasn't. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they work that out. I know a lot of people love the first round games being at home. That's neither here nor there for me. Don't really care one way or the other. I love the fact that the bowls are being incorporated in these, and the when you get down to 8, and then obviously the semis and the championship game as well. No, I think I like it. I've always been a proponent of playoffs, and certainly expanding it when you've got I think it's 119 or maybe even more FBS teams, and you only have 4 teams that legitimately have an opportunity to win a national championship. I think that's a little um, far fetched, just based on a lot of the other. When you look at FCS, I believe they have. I think it's a 16-team playoff that they have. Most other sports have a much larger playoff than what our sport does, and so I think it was inevitable, and I think it's a good move. to have a playoff system. And I think there's some games that mean more during the regular season, right? Your November games mean a lot more um, now, but I think also, it takes away from some games, right? It takes away from some games. But for me personally, I think that's good. First, when you take into consideration like this game, when you look at, um, I say this game like you guys can see my screen here, the Cincinnati Arkansas game, where if you lose here, you're not necessarily completely out of it, right? I mean, you can go on a run, and so you can take a loss or two, especially a couple, two or three losses, and still work your way into those playoffs and um, have an opportunity to play for a championship. But I think this is what I would like to see, and this is something that I don't know that would ever happen. But there's a couple of things like that I would like to see. Um, you as a conference championship, as a conference champion, you're only an automatic qualifier if you're within the top six in the country. Yeah, you still make the playoffs, but you can be a lower seed. But and a couple of other things that I think probably would never happen, at least not for a while. But if the if college football kind of breaks away from the NCAA, I think you should have a Power Five national championship, or a playoff, I should say, and then you have a Group of Five championship. Just because there's it's you're on uneven playing field. Like if you are, and I'm just throwing somebody local, Tulsa can't be expected to play by the same rules and compete for the same championship that a team like Ohio State or Oklahoma or Alabama or Clemson or Georgia or whoever it is, like the big dogs, like they're never going to be able to compete with those schools, but they can compete with Coastal Carolina, they can compete with Army, they can compete with um, Cincinnati, they can compete with all these other schools that have done a great job. Boise State as a Group of Five team, but so that's my far fetched, not plan, I guess is not the right word, but idea that I feel like to make things more fair. So we'll see. So Ryan, back to OU run game of solace, all opposing D linemen getting driven 4 yards down the field a few times. Yeah, I agree. I think there's nothing wrong with the running game. I think they win. There was just a if I was just to nitpick a little bit, I think there were some times in the second quarter where they went away from the running game and a little bit more than maybe they should have. But who knows? Maybe that was just Levy has seen in practice that they're struggling a little bit with their timing in the pass game, and he wanted to get more kind of opportunities there. He really kind of knows what he has in terms of the run game. So that could certainly be something that's happening. Certainly could be something that that he wanted to take a look at a little bit more. But yeah, when you run for let me go box score here, 259 yards, 6.8 yards per carry. So yeah, I mean nothing wrong with that. Obviously, you're going to face much different and much better opponents, obviously throughout the rest of the year. But I think as an opener, you'll take that, without a doubt. And I'm looking here. Um, what a difference a year makes. Last year, you have through the first game of the year against Tulane, you 35 carries for 116 yards, 3.3 yards per carry, and as I mentioned, this year you've got 38 carries for 259 yards, and you've doubled the output on a teams that were very similar. I mean, you could make an argument that UTEP, at least this year, we haven't seen Tulane play, but UTEP last year was a much better team than Tulane. Tulane was, I believe, 2-10. UTEP 6-6, made not playoff, made a bowl game last year. So you've got to be really encouraged to where you're at from a running game perspective after this one game, and then you obviously know this team's going to score points. Levy scored points everywhere he's went, and you scored 45 points this game. being a little bit more vanilla at times. Yeah, I mean that's where I predicted Oklahoma at the end of the year, 10-2, and I think they're a Big 12 champion. You go 11-2, and then you make a New Year's Six bowl game, and just on the outside looking into the playoffs. I think if you do those things, that's a very successful year based on where Oklahoma's at in recruiting, and how things are going from a recruiting perspective. Um, you've got a lot of commitments in that have never seen Oklahoma play a game until today under the current coaching regime. So yeah, that gives you everything that you need. If you're able to win double digit wins and then obviously win a Big 12 championship, that would be a phenomenal first year for Venables and his staff based on who Oklahoma lost last year. Yeah, really, really solid. Oklahoma, when you look at last year, 430 total yards against Tulane. This year, 492, and then that kind of even goes with, the last half of the fourth quarter at least, really kind of milking the clock and not really doing, kind of doing a whole lot. So, um, and like I said, we'll get an idea of um, what Kent State will bring from a preparation perspective. Oh, excuse me. Later on this evening, let me, and I'll just kind of look real quick at what I think the Nebraska game has finished, and they won. Ended up winning 38-17. They pulled away a little bit. It was a 17-17 game if I remember right. Late 24-17 as they entered the fourth quarter, and then just the depth of a Power Five school was a little bit too much for North Dakota, but nothing too impressive out of Nebraska. Then we'll see. But obviously, from a physicality perspective, a talent level perspective, that will be obviously Oklahoma's toughest game here through the non-conference before they get into the conference play. So, just to go through a little bit, a few stats here. We didn't really go into detail. Dylan Gabriel, 15 out of 23, 233 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Eric Gray, 16 carries for 102 yards. Like everybody said, a couple of people said much better between the tackles than he was last year. Thus far, 7 carries for 54 yards for Marcus Major, a couple of touchdowns. Really just tough runs in the red zone near the goal line. We talked about Gavin Freeman's the one carry for 46 yards and a touchdown, and just an incredible effort play. 4 carries, 25 yards, and the last little bit there for Javante Barnes could have had a touchdown if not for that Savion Bird holding call. But overall, like I said, 38 carries for 259 yards. For Oklahoma there. And then you look at receiving. Marvin Mims led the way, 3 catches for 81 yards. Braden Willis, 3 for 40 and a couple of touchdowns. And then you've got Theo Weiss, three catches, 27 yards. Eric Gray, 2 catches, 33. Drake Stoops, 2 for 25. Jalil Farouk, 1 for 9. And then Marcus Major, 1 for 8. So it'll be interesting to see how that receiving core continues to play. Nothing bad necessarily today. I think you just had the one drop by Jalil Farouk, but look to see that improvement in the passing game. I think overall, as you progress, through the season, it was kind of weird. UTEP actually out first down Oklahoma 26-23, probably because a few of those long plays that Oklahoma had. Oklahoma 492 total yards, UTEP 316. I think when you third down efficiency, UTEP 5 out of 15, OU 3 out of 18. Then we talked a little bit about time of possession. Obviously, UTEP had the significant advantage, and this will be the case most of the year for anybody that Oklahoma plays. UTEP had the ball for 38 minutes and 33 seconds. Oklahoma for 21 minutes and 27 seconds. So, yeah. So all in all, very good. A very good opener for Oklahoma. It looks like they were relatively injury free. Wanye Morris was out obviously for the first two games. Daniel Parker was out today. I think that was the only one that Daniel Parker was one that I wasn't really aware of until close to the game starting. I haven't heard a ton about that specifically. I hope that's nothing major. Just haven't heard anything really specifically about that. So, but yeah, everything that you would have hoped for. You covered the spread. The defense played well, giving up only 13 points. Offense was pretty good, and so both areas, how Venables will grind this team and how he'll make sure that they are improving every single day, every single game, and so a lot to look forward to in here. But we will obviously remember on Wednesdays we will go live with you guys talking about Oklahoma football. We'll do a little bit of a minor recap on this game for the Sooners, and then certainly we'll talk a little bit more about Kent State. I'm going to be watching them tonight just to see how they play, and then just to see what that looks like for Oklahoma, and then obviously you've got Nebraska in 2 weeks, so. Happy to be with you guys as always. Got 82 people on the line. Remember to hit that like, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live from time to time. I'll do something a little bit. If there's some breaking news or anything like that, do something off the cuff, not necessarily at the same time every single week. So make sure you're involved. We're close to about 5,000 followers right now, subscribers, I should say. So enjoy the rest of your football Saturday, and Boomer Sooner. God bless.